So let's now move on to the demand curve. And to be perfectly honest, if you sort of understand how to construct the supply curve, constructing the demand curve shouldn't be too much of an intellectual leap, right? The only key difference here is that we have a new imaginary unit, right, which we call utils, which is satisfaction. And again, the idea as to how you kind of construct it is very, very similar as to what you'd consider for a supply curve, except now you have to consider yourself as the consumer rather than as the actual producer. That's basically the key difference. But beyond that, the actual exercise, the sort of intellectual exercise is really quite similar, right? So you just gotta have to put yourself as a consumer. So again, just to help motivate this particular discussion, let's go back to the slides again. And who we have here now is Isa. Okay, so Isa is Alberto's wife, and she's very, very lovely. And she's basically considering the consumption of two types of goods. Again, we're sort of in this very stylized world. So the first type of good is soda. And the second good is called other goods. Okay, so other goods is just other goods. Don't ask me over the forum what exactly is other goods. Other goods is simply other goods. So when we consume something, okay, we derive some level of satisfaction. Again, think about what happens when you consume your first unit of pizza. If you're hungry, you get very, very happy. But what happens when you consume more of it? Well, at some point, maybe your second pizza, you'd feel like, oh, don't feel so good anymore. All that oil is sticking in my stomach. And probably by a third pizza, well, at least for me, I'd probably want to vomit pizza. Okay, that's another concept which we'll briefly touch on, and that's what we call diminishing marginal utility. Okay, but let's just stick with this example, and let's say that for the first unit of soda, okay, Isa is quite happy because it's sugar. Okay, she gets 2 utils. Okay, for the second unit of soda, she would then get 4 on 3 utils. So that's a 3. Let me make that a bit clearer. And we have third, where she then says, I only get 1 util. Okay. And as you can kind of see here, it's kind of diminishing. So she's probably had her sugar high here, more sugar high, less of a sugar high, and eventually she probably wants to stop having sugar because she doesn't exactly want to get diabetes. So that's soda. Okay. Now, for the other good, again, let's simplify the analysis. And let's say that for all the other goods, it's all nice and healthy. So 1, 2, 3 units of other goods. She always receives 1 util. Okay, so this is other goods. Okay. And of course, there are prices attached to these things. Nothing is free on this planet. The price here is basically, let's say it's $2 per can. And for the other goods, the price is equal to $1. So let's call this P of S for soda and P of O for other goods. Okay. And like any sane, like most people, she's also got a budget that she needs to stick to. Right? We all have budgets. That's a reality of life, guys. There's nothing you can do about it. And let's say it's $4. Okay. So conceptually, right, you can kind of see where this is going, right? What you want to do as Isa is basically say that, well, let's see what I want to spend it on. That's basically the question that I want to answer. Well, for the first decision, do I want to consume the first unit of soda or do I want to consider other goods? So with the soda, right, the first unit, I would have to sacrifice $2, okay, and I get 2 units, 2 utils of benefit, okay. So is that better than the other goods? Well, it's going to cost me $2. Okay, so if it's going to cost me $2, in terms of other goods, I can consume 2 of them. And I would receive 1 util for each of the other goods. So I would receive 2 utils. Okay. So at this point, you'd say, well, I'm kind of indifferent then. But let's just, for argument's sake, say that I would consume soda. Okay. Now, I've spent $2 and I have $4. The next thing I need to consider is, well, do I really want to consume the second unit of soda, or do I want to consume other goods? Well, let's think about it. If I were to consume the second unit of soda, it's going to cost me $2. Okay. And from that, well, how much satisfaction will I get? I get 4 on 3. So that's for soda. Alternatively, if I spent that $2, okay, on the other goods, then I would receive 2 utils. So this is other goods. So which is the greater? Well, clearly 2 utils is greater. So in other words, I wouldn't necessarily want to consume the second unit of soda, isn't it? Right? So here you'd say that, well, I would consume, as my third dollar, I would consume other goods. Okay, so at this point we have Q of soda equals 1, and Q of other goods is basically 1. So then I still have a third dollar. Okay, so assuming that soda is divisible, would I still want to consume the second soda? Well, again, if you divide 4 on 3 by 2, you're going to get 2/3, aren't you? And that's going to be less than 1. So most certainly not. So as a result, what you're going to find is that Isa's consumption, if she were to exhaust her budget, is basically 1 soda and 2 of other goods, right? So again, right, what you're effectively doing is you're basically comparing the utility that you would get from the consumption of soda to that of other goods, okay? So that's the idea. Again, we're applying the cost-benefit principle. That is, I will undertake an action if and only if the utility in this case from consuming soda is greater than other goods. But again, think about what the demand curve consists of. Okay, remember it looks something like this. P and Q, and that's your demand curve. So again, think about what we've done. We've set a price of $2, okay, which is here. And we found that the quantity of soda is basically equal to 1. So again, we've only found 1 point. Okay? So to actually do this construction, you have to vary the prices and then figure out what these other points are. Right? So we know that the number 1 is here, but what are these numbers? Well, vary the price and see what happens. What would happen if I were to increase the price? Right? So for example, if it were $3, would I necessarily want to consume any soda? Well, probably not, right? Because if it was $3, if I were to sacrifice $3, I only get 2 utils. My other goods, right, being only $1, I would obtain 3 utils. So what's my demand at a price of $3? It's going to be equal to 0, isn't it? So pretty much like the previous section on supply, you can kind of see where the ideas are very, very similar, right? You're doing this comparison and seeing how the prices will affect the quantity you consume and or supply. As a bit of an exercise, just to make sure that you understand this material, what I recommend that you do is actually try a different price. See what happens. Is it intuitive? Do it for both supply and demand. what would happen if you change the price of the other goods, right? The alternate good for which you're doing the comparison. What do you expect would happen, right? If you think about it intuitively, if the price of this thing goes up, right, this becomes relatively more attractive then, doesn't it? Again, think about what your comparison would be, how this affects your decision. And of course, in the case of demand, think about what would happen if you vary your budget, right? If you vary your budget, what would happen to the quantity that you can consume at each price point? Okay, so hopefully now this should be relatively clear as to how you think about how you'd construct a demand curve. And for the next part, we'll be talking a little bit about putting them together in equilibrium.